An underrated matchup of week 3 is Fresno State heading to Arizona State to pull off yet another Power 5 upset. The Bulldogs already have a win against Purdue, and they are looking to add another one against the Sun Devils. This is a Fresno State team that comes in 2-0. Arizona State sits at 1-1. Both teams have different views on the season so far. I think Fresno State is the surprising team of the Mountain West, and they are playing with a ton of confidence on both sides of the football. Not exactly surprising if you looked at their rosters. Arizona State is a team looking to figure things out under Kenny Dillingham. There's plenty of talent on this roster. It's just that we haven't seen consistency from this group. We've seen a number of big plays, which is a staple in Dillingham's offense, but we just haven't seen the consistency to be able to compete with a team like Oklahoma State, and that could mean trouble for a team that they face in Fresno State. Again, we talked about another upset coming for Fresno State, the 39-35 win against Purdue was really fun to watch. If you were not paying attention to Fresno State, you did not expect that. But for those of us that watched Fresno State last year and the year before, we knew that Jeff Tedford could do this, and winning at Purdue shouldn't be a surprise. I think the biggest question for either of these teams is what does Arizona State's quarterback situation look like? And it affects both of them. Fresno State's probably preparing for Jane Rashada, but Drew Pine comes back, and we'll see what that means. They're probably going to prepare for both, but can Drew Pine take over that job, or do we see enough from Jane Rashada where he will still keep the job? Because we saw some really exciting things. We saw why he is one of the best quarterback recruits in the country, but we also saw some freshman mistakes. So, do they give the ball to Drew Pine? Do they allow him to take over, or do they just continue riding with Rashada and letting him do his thing? I'm really interested to see that. That'll be probably the biggest question for me. For the offense, we talked about the deep shots for Dillingham's offense. Can Fresno State's defensive backs hang? We'll talk about a matchup that I really like that's super underrated coming into week 3. But the deep shots that Arizona State will take, because they will take them, it determine a lot about this matchup. It'll determine a lot about the outcome. And for Fresno State, it's just a matter of hanging on at certain points and not allowing too many of those deep shots to hit. If you can limit it to zero, obviously the more, I guess, the less the better. But I think that they are in for I want to say rude awakening, but this is a team that can definitely take advantage of them if Fresno State isn't prepared. If they do not come in with that underdog mindset, because right now they're favored on the road. So Arizona State technically is the underdog, but anytime a group of 5 opponent plays against a power 5, I think that you're more likely to think the power 5 should be the favorite. But they have to treat it like they're the underdog, and they have to find a way to move on from last week. Last week, I don't know if they were just looking ahead to Arizona State and got caught looking against Eastern Washington. But the fact that they needed overtime to win opens up a little bit of concern if you're a Fresno State fan. That's something that I'm hoping isn't an issue going forward, but we will see. I think Fresno State has a lot to still play for, a lot to prove, and they should play like a team that has a lot to prove. The quarterbacks obviously will be the biggest thing. I think that Jaden Rashada, if he plays, is going to be the guy that everyone keeps an eye on because you're looking at a player who has a ton of talent. You saw the big time playmaking ability. You saw his talent. You saw the deep threat that he is. If he can sling, he can sling it, and he can move the ball all over the field. But it's just a matter of being consistent. And right now, he is a freshman that is learning kind of on the go. And I really like what Arizona State can do. I really like their offense because they have so many playmakers that you don't necessarily have to. I guess you don't have to rely on any one of them to be the go-to guy, but you have plenty of options downfield. Xavier Guillory had a big game against Oklahoma State. He emerged as a playmaker. Jalen Conyers is a really good tight end. Elijah Badger is an extremely explosive wide receiver. The passing attack is in great hands. I think an underrated player as well is Cameron Stadville. He's been really fun to watch, a physical runner for Arizona State. The balance of this offense could determine a lot about how successful they'll be this year. It just might take a little bit of time for them to find their footing. And you're in a very talented and a very deep Pac-12 conference. So finding ways to find stability and consistency will be the biggest key. Mikey Keene takes over for Fresno State at quarterback, and he did not waste any time introducing himself against Purdue. He had a big game against Purdue and not as good of a game last week, but you still saw him lead his team to victory. And I think that he will be one of the more fun players, one of the more entertaining players to watch in the Mountain West. And he has some good playmakers to utilize at wide receiver too. Eric Brooks had a big game against Purdue. They're looking for big things out of him once again. Pass offense for Fresno State is really good, and I think that's what helps their pass defense because when you look at the matchup that I want to look at, Cam Lockridge against, I mean, really anybody, but Elijah Badger. I think those are two of the alphas on their respective units. Cam Lockridge is a cornerback that flies under the radar. I don't think anybody's really paying attention to him, but that's disappointing because they should. Elijah Badger had a couple of big plays so far this year, and this is a matchup that will be really fun to watch. How does each of them gain an advantage? Does Badger find ways to get open, or is Lockridge just going to be sticky? Lockridge knows what to do when the football is in the air. He's really good in terms of ball skills. He's an experienced player, and Badger is an explosive weapon that will give him everything he can handle and then some. So this is definitely a matchup that will fly under the radar. I don't think a lot of people are expecting anything from this game, but it's definitely one that you need to pay attention to. I think that this group on Fresno State is motivated, and if they can treat this game like they're the underdog once again, then they're in good hands. Playing on the road will be tough, though. I think Arizona State will make this one interesting for sure. But if I have to lean one way right now, even with the uncertainty that was last week against Eastern Washington, I'm going to lean Fresno State. I think that they are the better team. They're playing with more confidence. They make less mistakes right now, which is probably the biggest thing. And Arizona State has a lot to figure out. Now, if Arizona State can find a way to use this as a stepping stone towards momentum for the rest of the year, it just comes down to who plays quarterback. Maybe they use two quarterbacks. Maybe Rashada and Pine split time. Maybe they go back and forth. I think you got to figure that out, though, if you're going to find success. I think 2023 will still be a long year, even if they win this game, but at least they can figure out what does their future look like? Who is going to be their quarterback of the future, who will be the guy that leads this team in the Pac-12. Because right now, Rachada's shown some really exciting things, but we haven't seen the full picture because Pine hasn't been really given an opportunity to compete for that job. So, like I said, Fresno State to me is the more complete team right now, but Arizona State will definitely give them plenty of trouble and will give them plenty of things to figure out, plenty of challenges. But right now, the Bulldogs have my attention. They have Arizona State's attention, and they're going to go on the road and get the job done again.